So welcome everyone. I know that this is a little bit different of a topic. We're actually going to focus on privacy today. You know, if you're keeping up with privacy or if you're interested in this space at all, it's something that's not going away anytime soon. And we're very lucky to have two DPOs, which is really rare on this panel. So first, John, who all of you met this morning, works for Pokemon. If you went to the keynote, you got a chance to hear him speak. And then Jen as well too, who's the DPO of Sumo Logic. And so we're going to take a run through privacy, what's currently happening now, and take it above and beyond GDPR, because it's not just about GDPR. I think GDPR was just kind of a mechanism on how to get there. But why don't we start off with each one of them doing a brief intro, even though you probably already know who they are, but just get their perspective. John?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think the kind of other side, the other hat that I wear as the data protection officer for the company, really traditionally it hasn't been looked at as the same thing as information security, but I think, moving forward, we're going to see those things converge a lot more, and I think there's a lot of synergy that can come from, the technical aspects of my job as the information security officer, and then my policy responsibilities when it comes to data protection. So obviously we're a worldwide brand, so GDPR hit us pretty significantly, as we have many European customers, and as I mentioned in either the keynote this morning or talking over there, we established that as our bar of entry for all of our customers, not just the European ones. So obviously privacy is a big deal for us.
Jen?
I'm Jen Brown. Sorry, losing my voice. I'm the DPO at Sumo Logic, but I also am the compliance officer. So everything that's external audits, that's me. And as John was just saying, privacy just can't survive without security. You can't achieve privacy unless you've got a good security program in place. So that's always been really important to us, as is privacy. Those are our two main focuses. So I've been with Sumo Logic for about 2 years now, working with George, and I've been in IC security, all the GRC realm for over 20 years. So happy to be here.
I see a shameless plug up there, which I forced you to do because you're a very humble person.
Yes.
Can you talk just a little bit about that shameless plug?
I wrote a series for GDPR for dark reading, so any of you that haven't gone through the whole fun of GDPR and are looking for some suggestions on how to start a privacy program, those types of things, it's a good series to go check out. And
I'll absolutely vouch, when our company was starting to do the initial steps of trying to wrap our arms around GDPR, these two were really some of the flag bearers in the industry as far as, what are some actual discrete steps you can get to get there. So thank you very much, Jen. You helped us out quite a bit.
Cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
And the last thing is we have our privacy dog over there with Roland, so thanks for holding on to Max.
We call him Luke Cage. Okay, so what we're going to discuss today is going to be three different things. We're going to talk about the state of privacy today, where we're currently at, the cause and effects of GDPR, and yes, the world didn't come to an end on May 25th of 2018, even though a lot of people thought they would. I'm sure you guys experienced it at Pokemon as well too, but it was incredible the amount of privacy statements that people sent us on May 24th saying, sign this now or you're out of compliance, which we quickly deleted and put them in the bit bucket, no offense to anyone. But GDPR was kind of like a paper DDoS attack, and then now, so we're going to look at the current state, where it's at, and then we're going to take a look at what's moving forward, so what can we expect with like the California consumer privacy regulation that's coming out, and then also what it means to have a privacy program. What the difference is between having the one-time event of something like GDPR, which is actually continual, versus the new and emerging privacy regulations that are out there today. So, before we get to this, I'm going to throw a curveball.
Sure.
Okay, let's dial it down to GDPR just for a second. Have you met anyone who does not come under GDPR, and if so, why? And let's start with Jen.
Our customer-wise?
This is bad because we did not rehearse this at all.
I've met a lot of people who thought they didn't come under GDPR.
That's pretty common.
But, and I've never argued with them because that's not my place. But yes, I've not met anybody who doesn't come under GDPR.
Yeah, I think the same is true for us, right? Or for me, I think you and I had this conversation. We were laughing about it, like the United States Postal Service. Like you wouldn't really think. They're the United States Postal Service, not the European Postal Service, but they still have a significant amount of data for European customers that are in their systems. And so that's what's really fascinating about it is, I think there were some, like she said, you met plenty of people that didn't think that they were, but then found out later. There was another category of people who just decided not to believe that they were and stuck their head in the sand like an ostrich. So, yeah,
and some even tried to cut their scope down so they wouldn't be in scope, but they didn't realize that any European citizens that are here in the United States doing business with them or anything else are in that scope. So even though they cut out this whole section of potential customers, they still weren't scoped out of GDPR.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's kind of what I'm seeing out there as well too. So it's good to get that perspective. So let's start with Jen first. And when you think about Sumo Logic and where we're at, and thank you for heading up our privacy program. You've done a great job. What drove our privacy program in your mind, and especially because of the way you came in? So some background for those of you that didn't go to the last session. We actually brought Jen in under fire. Like we brought her in and handed over the crown jewels of a PCI audit to her, and she went out and smashed it, obviously. But when you were doing the PCI audit and when you were working with Sumo as a contractor, how did you start thinking about our privacy program, and what do you think really drove it?
And so I'm going to throw you a curveball because we already had a privacy program. PCI and HIPAA are privacy. I mean, a lot of people don't think about PCI being privacy, but it is. You're keeping that credit card data private. Obviously, security is a big part of that too, but we also had HIPAA. So we already had a privacy program in place, but we weren't thinking of it in a global perspective. I mean, PCI is global, but it was really taking that privacy program and taking it to the next step, doing the data flow mapping, doing the data privacy impact assessments against our data, and just broadening it and bringing it to the next maturity level. As you said, we set that bar to be GDPR, and then obviously things that come in like the California Consumer Privacy Law, we'll be able to fine tune for those upcoming laws, and there are many of them coming.
And what drove the privacy program for Pokemon?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's obvious. It's obvious to most folks, and again, I spoke about it a little bit earlier today. For a company that has a significant amount of personal data, both adults and children, we took privacy very seriously even before GDPR. But when I came on board and took on the mantle of the DPO, I really started thinking in terms of, how is this really going to impact the business? Like at the end of the day, how do we start aligning privacy with the business? And so the way that we think of it at Pokemon is, when you go to a Target store and you buy a plush toy, or you go and you let your child download Pokemon Go, like I was saying earlier, what you're really doing is you're putting trust in us as an organization to keep your data safe and keep your data private. And so from a business perspective, it's a proposition for us, a business proposition, and an opportunity for us to be at the forefront of that privacy discussion. Someday even having sort of branding and marketing around the fact that we take privacy really seriously. So it wasn't just a regulatory thing for us, it kind of evolved into something that we can use as an actual business driver.
I think that makes a lot of sense because, let's just remove the enterprise and business from it for just a second. When we stop and think about what's taking place today with social media and everything else, privacy has really become a major concern. I mean, listening to George Tenet speak this morning, he talked quite a bit about that, and how all that information is being put together to start attacks or to start even swaying people with propaganda when it comes to voting and everything else. So I think that the branding piece of it is huge.
Mm-hmm.
If you can associate yourself with personal brand as well as a operational brand of privacy first, you're going to make people feel pretty comfortable, because I'm guessing just a few of you that are in the audience today, outside of just Sumo Logic data, you're worried about your own privacy and exposure of that privacy within social media as well too. So what are some of your thoughts around that?
Go ahead.
Well, I don't think it's even a new concept, right? So whether it's the ESRB for video games or it's the rating system we have for major motion pictures, I don't remember what it's called, but the little TVM every time I watch something that I shouldn't be watching on television. Yep. It's one of those things where this has been around for a long time, where governing bodies are putting things in place to ostensibly keep people either safe from seeing a particular type of content that they weren't supposed to see or what have you. And I think privacy is going to end up being sort of the same way, where do I want my child or do I want my teenager signing up for this particular social media account? And when I do, am I being informed up front about how safe this is going to be for their particular data? Right. So I think that's sort of the future, right? And I think, thank you, Mark Zuckerberg, for kind of being the one that went through, that gauntlet first. Because at the end of the day, it makes our jobs a lot easier to convince leadership that this is something important for us.
Yeah, agreed.
And I think that, especially here in the U.S., I think the European consumers are a little bit further ahead of us. There's no such thing as a free slice of pizza. You're giving something, you're giving your data. And so many of us don't really think about every time we download an app, all of those things we're giving away, access to our photos and personal information, contacts, all of those things. People will just, I don't think the average consumer is really educated yet, but I think that there's a wave coming. I mean, we were talking about the whole net neutrality, and And I think so many people were oblivious as to what just happened to us and those rights that were taken away. So I think the education and those of us that are in the forefront, we're leading a new generation and really going to start to teach people about how important it is, and there's going to be an uprising.
Well, when you think about it, when you talk about generations, the 10 to 12 year olds today, when they get through high school and they go into college and they become, tax-paying citizens and all that sort of thing, this is going to be second nature for them.
Yeah.
Like they're never going to remember a world where they didn't own their data and we're able to say, hey, George, please delete me from your systems. I mean, it's going to be second nature. And I think the more that we can do now to be ready for that, the better off our organizations are going to be.
I think this is a fantastic point, because I say this quite a bit out there. Like, I believe that teenagers today actually have a better sense of privacy than adults. And I'll use social media to sort of describe this. Kids got off of Facebook a long time ago. And they got off of Facebook, why? Because their parents and grandparents were on Facebook. And so they ran over to Instagram. Then what happened? Well, Facebook bought Instagram, so then all the kids ran over to Snapchat. And think about the function of Snapchat. So Snapchat is where I have something that's out there for a little while. If someone takes a screenshot of that, I know. So I'm being notified immediately if someone is taking a screenshot or someone is looking at my Snapchat. And then it goes away. So it allows me to have a little bit more control over my privacy. The other thing I've noticed about kids too is that they don't set up voicemails on their phones. It's like if you have nieces, nephews, kids, anything else, they just have the default roll it into, because they just really protect their identity a bit more, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I think the finger's always pointed the other way, where I believe it's like if you look at Facebook, for example, parents, grandparents, hey, look how great my life is. A million pictures of them traveling all over the world or eating a big steak or whatever it may be. So.
Or my dad just shotgunning out memes constantly until I laughed.
I saw what your dad sent you this morning.
My God. And for what it's worth, I wouldn't have graduated high school had Snapchat or Instagram or Facebook been around. I'd be in jail right now. But
yeah, I wouldn't have a career because of the things that have been posted
Well,
on
what are
those
your
things.
thoughts on that? I mean, because you're multi-generational in your home, so like.
Oh yeah, I mean, Ben and Lucy. So I have grandchildren. I've got a 2-year-old grandson and a 4-year-old granddaughter, and I feel like they came out of the womb knowing how to operate tablets and computers, and it's just amazing to watch them. And so I have no doubt that they're going to be so much more savvy than I ever was, even though this has been my career. So.
Sure.
Yeah, no doubt at all. I mean, Ben's already playing Supersonic and Pokemon Go and proficient at it. So.
Thank you for his service. I appreciate it.
Yes. So,
my new tires thank him too.
Yes.
So let's dial it back up to the enterprise then, as we're starting to prepare for this next wave of young privacy soldiers and people, hitting our communities and everything else. Why a program, Jen? Like, this is something that you brought to my attention a while back. Like, why a privacy program and not just say, look, we're going to update our privacy policy? Why does it have to be a program in your mind?
Otherwise, you're always reacting. It's just like with our compliance program, with our audits. Instead of having our PCI, here are our controls for PCI, here are controls for HIPAA, here are our controls for security, here are controls for privacy. How do we keep those going and continuous and keeping up with them? And then when things like the California privacy law comes, or the new one in Connecticut, Colorado, all the new ones that are coming out, the new financial laws, which I think there's another one, complements New York. In one of the Carolinas, I believe. When those come out, it's just a matter of plugging in those additional requirements if there are additional requirements, instead of trying to react constantly.
What's the impact of that to a business as a new regulation comes out? So like, for example, the California consumer law, like what's the impact to a business like Pokemon when that happens?
Oh, the impact can be pretty massive, right? Not just from a privacy perspective, but a lot of folks don't understand things like tariffs overseas, hit us pretty hard because our card game is a high commodity item, and all of a sudden we're going to get taxed 15%. Thank you, President Trump. But when it comes to privacy, because we're a global brand, because we have customers all over the place, we need to be concerned with every single state that passes one of these laws, every single country. We have a huge following in Brazil, a huge following in Argentina, a huge following all over the world. And so it becomes a significant emotional event for us, because obviously, our doomsday scenario, knock on wood, our doomsday scenario is being on the front page of CNN because we broke some sort of privacy legislation somewhere. Because like I was saying before, if our product is trust and we violate that trust, you're not going to get it back. Not very easily.
No.
Because as soon as we stop being a place where people feel safe to bring their children and bring their business, our business starts to wither. And so it's incumbent on privacy professionals within their organizations to really do the due diligence on the homework of how does their business operate, what's important to your board, what's important to your CFO, what's important to your CEO, and then align why is making sure privacy for your company going to impact the things that's important to them. A wise mentor of mine once told me, Senior Master Sergeant Matt Bedard in the Air Force, he said, you know what, John, the Air Force cares about you, or the Air Force cares about its people, but they just don't care about you. Privacy is the same in most organizations. Corporately, they care about privacy, but Tim in finance doesn't give a shit about privacy. And so how do you raise that sort of culture within your organization to ensure that everyone becomes a privacy professional and everyone is doing the due diligence? And a privacy program gets there because what do you have? You have policies that people need to sign that says, hey, you're going to handle private personal data. This is how you handle it, and all those sorts of things that everyone becomes a soldier in the privacy army, so to speak.
Yeah, which is a great point too, which leads me to a question for you, Jen. Like around Article 30 and people handling data, like I know when you came to Sumo Logic, that was a challenge, was to figure out, I mean, even like sales, marketing, HR, like how they handle this data on a day-to-day basis and how it flows. Can you walk us through the state that it was in, full transparency again, and then some of the things that you did to help us improve that program?
Yeah, in all fairness, I mean, this wasn't just me, but this was me helping to lead it. I mean, we had a situation where our developers had a lot of access, and that has been dialed back. We didn't know a lot of our data flows, and so documenting those has been really huge. I know when I came back from training for GDPR, Christian and Bruno sat down with me, and Christian's face was just white. He had that moment of, oh my gosh, this doesn't just impact production like these others.
Though. He's German. He's the one that created this.
Exactly.
That's right.
This actually impacts the whole business, not just the production environment like our other certifications, but sales, HR, marketing, finance, the whole A to Z. So. That I think that was a little bit of a learning curve for us as an organization. The best thing for us was, though, that we had a culture of security. So adding privacy into that hasn't been all that difficult. Everybody's aware of those things. When we onboard people, we talk about, it's funny, our first slide in our privacy awareness, our security awareness training is trust. And we talk about if we don't have our customers' trust, we don't have jobs. So you've got to keep their trust. So instilling those into our employees all the time and just trying to remind them of we're always doing the right thing by the customer and thinking about privacy and security.
Well, I'm glad you hit on the data visibility point as well. I mean, because that's the thing is when you have that big data lake, it's really hard to figure out where all of it sits.
Right.
One of the issues we had was, so we have the Pokemon Trainers Club, which kind of sits at the center of our business, right? But then we also have, Pokemon Center, which we sell merchandise, right? And then we have, obviously we use Salesforce for marketing emails, and then we have all these other systems. So there's a lot of on-ramps for people to interact with our business, and those on-ramps, once you get into the system, doesn't necessarily talk to the other one. So Pokemon Trainers Club doesn't really talk to, Pokemon Center. So when a European customer makes a subject access request, okay, I understand where their data sits here because that's kind of our core business. Oh man, but did they also buy a Pikachu, hat from the Pokemon Center? And just because I gave them the data I had stored there, did we do the due diligence of pivoting to that other system and give them that as well? And so it becomes a challenge of, how much do you want to start linking all those systems together, or is there a tool out there that can help us? But that data visibility challenge ends up being a bear.
It's really interesting too, because I know, Jen, you and I just had a conversation upstairs about this. What is the impact to all these sub-processors for someone like us when people are trying to do business with us? Like, what are some of the challenges you see, and then what are some of the shortcomings and perception that people have as to the third-party tools that John was sort of talking about? Look, we use Salesforce, right? We use Marketo, Zora, and lots of other auxiliary things, even though our platform is AWS where the data is stored. So what's the cause and effect of that?
We got to make sure that we have DPAs with them. So if we have a sub-processor who's also a customer of ours, then we've got 2 DPAs in place.
Can you describe a DPA really quickly?
DPA is a data processing addendum. And so what that does is it sets out the roles and responsibilities of what we're going to do versus the other party. So in a situation where someone is our customer, they're going to be the controller, we're going to be the processor. But then when we turn around, if they're our vendor, we're the controller, they're the processor. So sometimes you have both in place. I think we've even had a couple where they wanted a processor to processor, and it gets really complicated. Recently we're dealing with an issue where we're trying to close a deal with a customer, and they are trying to understand why data would ever go through a non-production sub-processor. And we're trying to explain to them that if we use a tool like Salesforce and you go and query that particular customer, then their data is going to be, just that query is processing. It's not the same processing as what's in the service,
right?
But it's still processing. So it gets really complicated, and sometimes people don't always use the same vocabulary, and getting on the same page is like speaking Spanish and Portuguese. So,
by the way, thank you very much for writing our DPA for us.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
You're welcome.
it
I'll thank our external
really
counsel for you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
DPAs were like the spearhead of the GDPR DDoS attack that started taking place last year. But that's actually a good point. So we feel like, we're pretty proud of our DPA. It's not perfect like anything else, but we put a lot of time and effort in it, and then we automated the release of it to our customers. So do you mind kind of describing the experience you had, like looking at our DPA and how that worked?
Yeah, no, it was great. I mean, so I think one of the good things is that, and I think moving forward, this is going to be our rule of engagement, is one of the first things after you and I had our initial conversations and after our engineering teams got together and, all right, we want to get going with this. The next thing was, all right, can I talk to Jen? Because she and I probably need to get some of this paperwork started. And I enjoyed two things about the interaction. One, the self-service portal is awesome. Like, that's just a great idea. Putting all your policy documents and all of your templates in one place so I can go out and I don't have to keep pinging you back and forth. But the other thing was this concept of who takes the lead. Like, who takes the lead on writing the DPA?
Yeah.
It does not make sense for my legal team to take the lead on writing a DPA because we're not as well versed in exactly how that processor controller relationship is going to go. You guys are doing it with all of your customers. We're not doing it with like 50 Sumo logics. We're doing it with a logistics company, we're doing it with Sumo, we're doing it with CrowdStrike, we're doing it with and all of those are so nuanced that if my legal team tried to like tailor make all of those, they would be in a DDoS of paperwork. And I think you mentioned that you've had problems with customers that they want to take the lead on it and then it's shit.
Yeah, and then we have to go in and it takes us so much time, and so we've actually, as my boss likes to say, we're drinking our own champagne. So when we deal with our sub-processor, we ask them for their DPA because, again, they've tailored it to their systems. Now, sometimes they won't have one if they're a small company, and we have to give them something that we've written. But for the most part, we try to flow that back down. So when we have those obligations and have to flow those obligations down, we sign the vendor's DPA.
Yeah, it's really funny because the DPAs drove our self-service model when it comes to questionnaires and then some of the information that we exchange openly with customers and prospects. But I can give absolutely no credit to the guy who actually developed the self-service portal. He's the biggest pain in the butt on the team, without a doubt. And so, props to Mike Calabi. So he's the guy that
around
did
here
it.
somewhere.
But it's been super effective. Like I think I mentioned earlier.
Thanks for the Pokemon pun there. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so we've had over 1,000 downloads in just a matter of 3 months, which shows you kind of the value of it, because that would have been FTE time sitting in the middle of it.
Yeah.
So it's good stuff, and thanks for using it as well too. So we've talked a lot about GDPR, and we talked about DPAs. I want to touch on one more thing before we move back over to the overall privacy picture. Do you see a value in a DPIA? I know that we have one scheduled coming down the line, so it'd be a good question maybe to start off with John. Do you see the value in one? Have you done one yet? What are your plans around DPIA? And could you mind explaining what it is?
So a DPIA is the Data Protection Impact Assessment. Essentially, it is a questionnaire that you fill out with the business owner and whoever they're trying to do business with or transfer data with to get a feel for what kind of data is being transferred, is there a business justification behind that data, so on and so forth. Essentially, it's a giant risk register, right?
Yeah.
When you think about it, it's cataloging it. And the way that I think it's valuable for two reasons. One, the way I look at it is being able to use it as that risk register and capture, like just overall, have a better visibility in how we're processing data and where we're processing data. The unintended consequence of a DPA, which has been pretty cool, comes into play with like supply chain security and third-party vendor security. Because guess what? Now I have a forcing function to go into their house and rummage through the drawers, right? Like in the past, when you didn't have to fill out something like that, and you didn't have to fill out a DPA, we could willy-nilly, contract with the third-party customer service vendor in Mumbai who has an unsecured S3 bucket. But guess what? Now that we have a DPIA process in place, we have to go ask them those questions. We have to have answers for that sort of thing. So they're not allowed to come back and say, oh, you know, we don't have time to fill anything out, we don't have time to do this, because then I can say, well, look, I guess we can't do business with you because we'd be breaking the law. And so I see value, because you could sort of start to extract really sneaky value out of the DPIA and use it for other purposes.
And to add on to what he's saying, and you have the data flows, and data flows are great because you got to know where data is. But until you do the DPIA, you don't know the risk and like this, you know, what is the risk of this data? Like, what do I need? What kind of controls do I need? Do I need to put extra controls around this data, or is this just, you know, superficial data? So that's another. But yeah, I love your point about the vendor management. You know, vendor management I think is lacking in so many, you know, enterprises, and this is really forcing your hand to go out there and roll those obligations down.
Yeah, I mean, because vendor management is tough for everyone.
Oh my gosh.
Everyone thinks they do it well. My first day on the job, the very first question I asked was, hey, how many vendors do we do business with, right? And they're like, meh, exactly.
Yeah.
I was like, how is that possible? Surely we're paying people. Like, surely someone is getting a check in the mail, right? And they're like, right? And so, I mean, this is an opportunity for privacy partners and security partners to really partner with the business and ensure that we start to kind of build out that visibility, you know, even with just third-party vendors.
Yeah, so I want to weigh in here a little bit too. It's not even just about the payment, because like most organizations I go to, the first thing that I try to put in place is a gate with finance. I go partner up with a CFO and say, listen, you don't pay for shit, nothing, until it's been approved by security or we've looked at it. But what about open source, right, and freeware? You developers out there, the worst on the planet. Because you guys are going to look for things that make you more efficient. You're looking for the cool, new, shiny toys as part of your CI/CD pipeline that you're going to bring into the environment that I no longer have a gate on unless I'm scanning for every last possible thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we have to sort of build that trust. So vendor management, agreed, difficult, and hopefully we get to solve some things in the future together. But I want to touch a little bit on the value of a DPIA from my standpoint. The first one is the gaps. You know, so a lot of times we don't like to think so, but we're a little easier on ourselves when we try to measure ourselves than a third party that's unbiased. You know, so that's one side of it. The other is to stop the DDoS attack again, because what we figure is if we can go through a DPIA and say, look, we've been through this, we're going through this yearly, go away. We should be able to do that. It's kind of like getting an ISO 27001 or a SOC 2 Type 2 to where you've measured yourself to an industry standard, so then that way hopefully it helps build that trust initially between us and you being either a customer or a prospect, that we've actually gone through the rigor of getting something like that done.
No, yeah, I mean, that's absolutely true. And I won't speak on behalf of our lawyers, because I'm sure they're listening somewhere, and the chief legal officer will jump through the ceiling and tell me,
Alexa.
you know, don't give anyone legal advice. But in reality, you know, you start looking in the news at how hard the European Union, how hard a time the European Union is having, even standardizing how they're going to prosecute, you know, cases and things like that. At the end of the day, the auditors are going to see due diligence and say, all right, they have the privacy program in place, they've been doing DPIAs, we understand that they had this entire scope, you know, of DPIAs they had to do, but at least they're getting there, as opposed to they walk in and there's nothing.
There's nothing.
GDPR doesn't apply to me.
Right.
Right. Again, which takes us to another point. You know, like, so let's say, you know, there's someone in the audience or one of our trusted partners, customers who really hasn't done much around GDPR, and now they're kind of getting that panic moment because the two of you have managed to scare the crap out of them. So what are some simple things that they could do? And let's start with Jen.
And taking a step back and seeing, you know, most people are going to have something in place, but really the first thing you've got to do, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, is get the inventory of the data. You need to know where your data is, and then start doing those, you know, assessments on what kind of data. Get some, you know, basic policies in place, and reach out for resources like my dark reading series. There's, you know, TrustArc has got many webinars, and, you know, there are people like us that you can reach out to as mentors and help. I mean, but I think a lot of people are spinning just in the fear cycle and not ready to make that step forward, but you've got to start taking those baby steps to eat the elephant.
Agreed. John?
You know, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think like the next step that you progress into is once you understand who those subject matter experts are, and once you make that, you reach out to them, start thinking through like, how am I really going to create privacy champions in my organization? How am I going to train my employees so that they understand? You know, to your open source point, like what we try to do is everyone who comes in the technology organization gets data privacy training, and they understand like this is the list of data that if you start processing it, we need to be involved at least to capture that that's where that data is going to live. You know, because otherwise it kind of gets out of control. So yeah, I think you're right. for sure.
That's fantastic. And so transitioning now to like where this is all headed. So first off, I mean, just the fines around GDPR is what I believe woke up the business. You know, and sometimes you have to use a little bit of the stick. You know, so like back at Sumo Logic when we first started talking GDPR years ago, I was like, look, this could be the impact. You know, we're talking 4% of overall revenue, up to $20 million in fines.
It's a lot of cheese.
It's a whole lot, right? Depending on not profit, revenue. Right?
Revenue, right.
So depending on which one is greater. But now we're starting to see things emerge like the California consumer law, which is got a whole different way of fining people. So Jen, do you mind walking folks a little bit through what those fines look like and a little bit about that regulation? Because this is scary. This is where all this is headed, and it's right here in Cali.
And it's always the fines, because I mean, think about PCI. People didn't really start adhering to PCI until there were the big fines, and they were taking your ability away, you know, to process credit cards. So with the California law, what happens is if you just have an egregious breach, then it's $7,500 per user affected. So think about all the people in California. If you're a big company, you've got a lot of users in California, that's going to be a lot of money. If you have a program in place, you're trying to do the right thing, the auditor sees that, then it's $2,500 per user, but you've got 30 days to cure. So try to fix it in 30 days. Then on top of it all, if let's say Equinix happened on January 3rd, 2020, and let's say we lived in California, we'd be able to walk up to them and just pay me. If we were infected, we wouldn't have to show them harm or anything. I believe it's between, 500 and 750 or something like that?
Yeah.
Which isn't a lot per individual, which I mean, I'd take an extra 750, but
Yeah.
when you add that up with the other fines as well, I mean, that could be quite catastrophic, so.
There's also this notion about it as being self-regulated.
Well, so the California Attorney General office is self-funded, so it behooves them to come and investigate all of us and see that if we're doing the right thing, if there were complaints. So that's a little intimidating. And then, obviously, I'm sure you've looked into this too. They've added onto PHI household information and device information.
IoT.
So in addition to everything that GDPR identifies, when you think about the implications of IoT and smart homes, I mean,
Yeah, device ID is exactly how most of that stuff works.
And John, what do you think about that statement when you hear it's self-funded? Like, what does that mean? Do you think they're going to be motivated?
I think I should have been a plumber. Mostly, it just scares the crap out of me. I mean, I think, just like the European Union, I think what we're going to start to see is because there's this cottage industry of data protection professionals, DPOs, and all that sort of stuff growing, and a lot of those people are coming out of legislative bodies, right? So the European Union, at the very beginning, when they started getting down the road of, we're going to have to start, prosecuting this sort of stuff, the regulators themselves started taking jobs at all these companies and start giving them advice on GDPR and starting getting those companies ready. And I think we're going to start seeing that, right? So there's got to be people to do this, right? There's got to be people to actually go out there and audit. And at the end of the day, if you're working in the California Attorney General's office and you've been getting paid whatever you're getting paid, probably not a lot, and you're a data protection expert or you're a privacy expert or you've been studying privacy law in the European Union and trying to make that impact in California, at some point you're going to go work for Google, right? You're going to go work for Sumo. You're going to come work for us. Right. Please come. And then so I think there's going to be kind of a delayed reaction in a lot of those cases because at the end of the day there's just not enough people and not enough brains that are going to be actually thinking about it. I think they're biting off a lot more than they could probably chew.
So last question, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. And we're also going to share a slide. In fact, I'll just throw it up here now for education on privacy. How does this scale? Because if I think about Jen and, again, such a valuable component back to Sumo Logic for us, how does this scale? That's what really worries me about where we're at with this, So now California coming out, you mentioned Japan, Brazil, Australia, New York, and financial institutions. How can companies like us and Pokemon, who are, so agile and growing, how do we scale around privacy without crippling the business?
Automation. Having, like I said, that baseline program of all your controls instead of trying to repeat every time. That baseline of controls and then figuring out what can I automate.
John?
And I think the same way that security scales, right? Baking it in as early as possible, understanding the pipeline all the way through. I guarantee you in 2 years, we're going to be standing over there and we're going to be having, not having a conversation about DevSecOps. We're going to be talking DevSecOps and those sorts of things. Like, continuing to add things into the pipeline where it makes sense, as opposed to trying to bolt it on later, which is way more expensive and probably not going to hit all the marks and all those sorts of things. So I think that's exactly how it's going to need to scale, is that the same way that most projects now need to kick off with a security person, an engineer, a dev, and all those sorts of things. There needs to be someone that's keeping an eye on policy and privacy and the like.
Yeah, it makes total sense. I mean, this is the only way to scale. It's going to be the combination of automation with baking it into all these processes early, and then sometimes you're just going to have to say no.
Yeah.
Like our business doesn't have demand for that certain regulation, so I'm not going to go after it for right now. I think we're pretty close based upon the controls we have, but I can't cover everything all at once.
Well, and some lawyers are going to just tell you that they're going to weigh the risks.
Right.
This is how much the fine's going to be. This is how much it would cost us to fight that in court. And this is how much it's going to cost us to develop for privacy. And they're going to make a recommendation, and at some point, the board or the CEO or somebody needs to say this is something that's important to us or it's not.
Yeah, agreed. All right, so with that, we have some time for a couple of questions. We'd love to get some. I know that it's not like the most exciting, except for us.
Man.
We geek out over
privacy
it all the time.
is sexy. Privacy is sexy.
We have privacy T-shirts on.
That's right.
This,
That's right.
But any questions about GDPR, privacy programs, where this industry's headed? More than happy to take that. Security, anything in general.
Also, please just raise your hand. I'll bring the mic to you guys.
Got to get at least someone willing to divulge their privacy and ask a question. Who's it going to be?
In order to ask the question, we're going to have to collect your name, your address, your social security number, your IP address, and your device ID.
I was looking at a slide from another event earlier, and I noticed, I think you use Vera as your encryption.
Say that again?
Vera?
Yeah.
Right.
Great question.
So I was just curious, do you use it across the board for all your employees or just critical employees?
So before you answer, could you just give some quick background for everyone on what Vera is and then go into that?
So Vera provides file level encryption for all your data files. Well, not all your data files, but a lot of your data files. So in a lot of organizations, your organization, I'm sure there's like this big shadow IT problem where some people use Dropbox, some people are using SharePoint, some people are using OneDrive, so on and so forth, right? Yours is perfect. Everyone uses exactly what you tell them.
Exactly.
At the end of the day, when I got to the company, it was a matter of, hey, am I going to really be able to, change all of our third parties' minds as far as when we send them files, hey, we're not going to send it through Dropbox or the like, or can I solve that problem at the file level so that all the files we send to them are encrypted? So essentially what it does is it'll wrap like an Excel file in an encrypted wrapper that shows up as an HTML. You send it to the distant end and you have policy controls, read, write, how long they look at it, did they try to copy paste it, and then you can time bomb it if necessary. And so
I love that feature, by the way, when you told me about that yesterday.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool. As an example, one of the use cases we have now with loading the logs into Sumo is that so I send an email to george@sumologic.com, even if George's credentials are compromised, if it tries to get open from a known bad IP or a known geographic region or something like that, it'll automatically time bomb because Sumo will alert us and then we can flip that particular switch. It's been really awesome for us. As far as your question about do we use it for the entire company, not yet. When I got to the company, we had a whole lot of things I needed to get us, in line with MFA, password management, all the monitoring that we were rolling out, and all those sorts of things. And if I cram those down the entire company's throat all at once, they're not going to be able to adopt it. And so my strategy with Vera was to kind of let it happen organically, this sort of organic adoption, right? So we picked our most risky part of the business. These are the people that are sending PII on a daily basis. We got them to adopt Vera, and they love it because they have this like granularity of control when it goes to, when a file goes to Chuck's card shop in Bolivia, they can see it, they can time bomb it, they can interact with it, all those sorts of things. And the value there is I solved my biggest problem, I stemmed the bleeding, so to speak, and as word started to get around, all of a sudden I'd be at executive meetings and the CFO would be like, hey, I heard you provided this really cool tool for the organized play team. Do you mind if we use that for finance? Well, yeah, Leon, that sounds great. And then slowly but surely it got to our design folks and it got to everybody else. And so it really does a good job of protecting our intellectual property and all those sorts of things. And the best part about it was I don't sell it as a security tool. I sell it as a functional tool. I sell it as you want to be able to see that pre-release video for the movie that's coming out next summer doesn't get into the wrong hands, well, here, I have a tool for you. And it's worked out pretty well. And I can talk to you afterwards if you want.
That's awesome.
Yeah, could you repeat the name of that tool? You've got my interest.
Vera, Vera.
VERA?
And they're going to be very happy that I'm doing this.
I was gonna say, are you getting a cut?
I saw them on Monday. I did a video for them.
salesperson?
Real-time value
pretty
there,
good.
though. That's
Yeah.
I'm going to have to let them know.
We're
I get a
We'll look at
discount.
them as well, too. So
Yeah.
that just goes to show you. Any other questions? We probably got time for one more. And I know you got one more. We got two. Well, actually, 1.5. Yeah, no. Okay, well, so let's wrap up. So in wrapping up, I'd really like to thank John, for one, his partnership, commitment back to Sumo, all the great things that they're doing in the security and privacy front, and for him to come out here and spend time with you today. And then Jen as well, too, such a valuable key component to Sumo Logic on many, many fronts, from a woman's leadership perspective to a privacy perspective, and just the overall guidance that she gives our company and the way that she handles your data. So let's please give them a big round of applause. And thank you all very much for coming out.